Almost every executive that I work with in construction companies struggles with multitasking. My guest today is Dave Crenshaw. He is the author of The Myth of Multitasking. And Dave is a speaker and a consultant. He works with Fortune 500 companies. His courses on LinkedIn have been viewed millions of times. And we take a very practical and deep dive into why multitasking is ineffective and what you can do to stop multitasking and start being more focused and productive in your leadership. Take careful notes, if you're not driving, of the practical tips that Dave gives, because they're going to be very helpful to you in terms of moving from being out of control with your schedule, being ineffective with the things that you need to do, and being more successful at executing your leadership responsibilities. Thank you for listening to Construction Genius. Feel free to share this podcast with other construction leaders. I know you're going to find this conversation extremely helpful. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Dave, welcome to Construction Genius. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, I'm so glad to be here, Eric.
You know, I'm excited about our discussion today because we're going to be addressing a very specific topic that I know many of my clients struggle with, and I know many people struggle with, and that is the whole topic and issue of multitasking. And so before we dive into the whys and the hows and stuff, I'd like to ask you, what do you mean by multitasking? Can you give us a definition for that?
Yeah, well, actually, and it's interesting you asked that question because really what I want to know is what someone else means by multitasking. And here's why I say that. Because we use this word and the word itself is just terribly inaccurate. Like it doesn't fit what is actually taking place. And you have to kind of go back to the origins of the word. It started when people started using Windows, right? And the computer could multitask and we thought that we could. But multitasking just doesn't exist. We cannot, as human beings, and even computers can't do it, we can't do multiple things at the same time. With a computer, it switches rapidly back and forth between those things. With a human, we're switching our attention back and forth. So in the book, I actually provide two alternative words to multitasking, and they're a lot more helpful. The first is switch tasking. That's where you're trying to perform multiple attention requiring things at the same time, like listening to this podcast while you're checking your text messages. Somebody's probably doing that right now, right? Yep. And when they do that, they're switching rapidly back and forth between those things. Yep. Then the other word is backtasking, which is short for background tasking, meaning something automatic is happening in the background or something that doesn't require my attention, like listening to this podcast while you're, going for a walk. Hopefully at this point, everyone doesn't have to pay attention to walking, right? They can pay attention to the podcast. So then the question becomes, when you're doing something, are you switch tasking or are you back tasking? If you're switch tasking, things are taking longer, you're making more mistakes, and you're increasing your stress levels. These costs are unavoidable. If you're back tasking, that can be productive. But the problem is when most people say, I'm a good multitasker, they're really referring to switch tasking, and they're always wrong when they say that.
Okay, so let's explore that a little bit more. Switch tasking is something that people go through all day, obviously. The phone rings, the email comes in, I have multiple alerts coming. Is there a time and place for that switch tasking, or is that something I should completely eliminate from the way that I'm operating?
Yeah, attention switches are the enemy. So what your goal should be is to try to minimize the number of switches that take place. Now, I've consulted a lot of people in the construction industry. I've worked with general contractors. I've worked with executives in commercial construction firms. And I know what's going on in the industry. You have hundreds of possible inputs coming at you throughout the day. So the question becomes not, can we get rid of all these? That's not realistic. But what can we do to reduce the impact of these? For instance, just one thing is having a regular check-in with your client, with your customer that says, okay, every day or every other day at 4 p.m., we're going to give you a status update. You give us any questions that you have. And that one little meeting allows everyone to kind of queue up their questions rather than peppering each other with them throughout the day through text messages and emails, which just chews your productivity to pieces. So if we can start to train the people that we work for and work with about when we're going to have talk about these quick questions, we're going to regain a lot of sanity and a ton of productivity.
So let's explore that a little bit, because what I'm hearing here is there's a need for scheduled discipline, and the way to eliminate much of this, either switch tasking as you call it or back tasking, is to assert some discipline over your schedule. What are some ways that you yourself do that, and you encourage someone who's in construction who, like you said, has all this different inputs coming in all day, every day? How do you focus on that scheduled discipline?
So it starts with understanding the nature of your industry, meaning how often are you going to get interrupted in your day? Part of the problem that people run into is when I talk about scheduling, they go, oh man, I got to schedule every single minute. And in fact, what I advocate is the opposite. I advocate that you have spaces between the appointments, that you underschedule your day, because we live in a world that is filled with interruptions. So part of what I do is I look at my schedule, even for this podcast, Eric, and I said, all right, I don't want to have another podcast bumped up right against this. If that happens, something's going to happen. I'm going to have an interruption, and then all of a sudden, everything just goes to hell in a handbasket. So instead, you want to leave breathing room between appointments. And the more likely you are to be interrupted, the less you should schedule for yourself in the day. So if I was talking to someone in the construction industry, I would say, do not schedule more than 60% of your day. Leave at least 40% of your day available for the inevitable interruptions. And then if you get lucky one day and you don't have those interruptions, it's like you've got bonus time. But leaving that space reduces switch tasking, because you're giving yourself permission to focus on one thing at a time.
A lot of the times, the reasons why we start multitasking is because of the interruptions that come from other people.
Right.
So I'm working on one thing, and then an interruption comes in. And many of those interruptions, I know when I'm working with my clients, we really work on the interruptions and distractions that keep them from working on their urgent tasks or their important tasks. So what is the relationship between multitasking and basically the way that I lead my people and communicate to them what I'm working on?
Okay. So the first thing is starting with your example. I'm a firm believer that a business and organization is the reflection of its leader. And if you see people chaotic and they're jumping all over the place, guess where they learned that from?
Yes.
Right? They learned it by watching you.
Yes.
And so part of it is first making that commitment yourself, because that's going to teach people more than anything else that you could say. The other thing is moving to a culture of when. A lot of businesses, especially construction, they're addicted to the culture of now. The culture of now says, when I have a question, I expect it to be answered now. And if you don't answer it now, when I send you that text message, I'm going to send you an email. And if you don't answer the email, I'm going to give you a phone call. And what we want to do is move to the culture of when. And the culture of when says, I am going to respond to you. I am going to deal with it. Here's the expectation that I established for you of when I'm going to do that. If I need to focus and sit down and work on, let's say, a bid, right? And I'm sitting at my computer, I'm working on it, and I want to be able to do focused work. I need to communicate to people when I will be available. What is the time when I'm going to stop working on that bid, and when am I going to allow myself to be open to their questions? Honestly, one thing that I hear is people advocate an open door policy. I think that's a terrible way to operate. Yes. Instead, have a closed door, open calendar policy, where you have slots in your schedule where people can say, all right, can I talk to you at 2? Yeah, at 2, I'm going to give you 100% of my attention. That is so much more respectful and far more productive.
But then let me push back a little bit, because
Sure.
So you said, let's say 2 o'clock, I've got a meeting scheduled with you. You know, I'm a project manager. You're the project executive. I've got an issue on the job, and it's 10:30. And this issue is something that I have to deal with right now, and I need your input. And if I don't get your input sometime before 11 o'clock, by 2 o'clock, it's going to be too late. What do I do in that circumstance? Yeah.
And I want to acknowledge that is real. And I'm not saying that you can get completely rid of those.
Okay.
We're trying to reduce the switches, because first of all, you have to understand that the average person loses 28% of their day or more due to interruptions and the recovery time associated with interruptions. That's a work week every single month.
What was that statistic again? Was it 28%? Did you say 28?
28. Yeah, that comes from a study out of BaseX Research. That was actually a while ago. In my field experience, I think it's much higher now. I think it's closer to 35%.
Yeah.
So anyway, so if I need to understand that protecting my attention is critical, but if interruptions happen that are emergencies, I must deal with the emergencies. So I suggest one question that you add to the workflow, which is, can this wait? Can this wait until our scheduled meeting? And if the answer is no, then you say, great, let's deal with it. But just asking that question starts to condition the people that you work with to ask it of themselves. Could this wait? Because I found that what most people interpret as emergencies are really impatiencies.
Yes.
Either that or they're just really poor planning. And we're dealing with issues that if we had discussed it the day before, they wouldn't have to pepper me at 10:15 in the morning when I'm in the middle of a call with that question.
So let me ask you this. What is the relationship between a leader's self-perception and that obsession with multitasking? And let me explain what I mean by that. Many times when I'm talking with my clients, we have to face the fact that they love being the hero.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is someone comes in and they knock on their door and they get a buzz out of the fact that, hold on a minute, let me deal with that question. And all of a sudden the eyes light up in the person who reports to them and they're thinking, wow, Fred's the best. Mm-hmm. How does a leader deal with that self-perception and that need sometimes to be seen as the hero?
Well, you just highlighted the biggest obstacle that I face when I consult people and coach them on how to get over this, which is they pride themselves on their ability to multitask. They pride themselves on being busy. I mean, that's so much of the culture that we have now. How are you doing? You keeping busy? Like, that's a good thing.
Yeah, right.
It's not.
It's not.
Busy isn't a badge of honor. It's a white flag of surrender. It means you're not in control of yourself. So what I try to help leaders do is shift their thinking away from action to results. Frenetic, chaotic action all over the place is not success. Knocking projects down, doing an awesome job with them, that is success. And if you did it in 90% less hours than the person next to you, that is truly succeeding, because then that means that you are more efficient, you're more productive, and you have better work-life balance. So the goal should be to ask yourself, how can I do this? How can I get the same result in less time?
Okay.
If you can get the same result in less time, that is success.
Yeah, it's interesting because I often think when those interruptions are coming in, those interruptions are indicating where you haven't trained your people, where you haven't clearly communicated with your people, and where you're getting that kick, like we said, out of those interruptions, and it's keeping you from the highest and best use of your time.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. What is your perspective on the whole idea of time blocks, of setting aside specific time to do one thing and not to be interrupted by anything else? Give me some feedback on that.
Yeah, I'm actually a big fan of that. I think it works best when you focus on the value of the activities that you're doing. And this is something in the book, there's like an in-depth process for it. But basically what you do is you list out all the different types of work, different categories of work that you do. And you ask yourself, what is the value of this per hour? And I'm not talking about like separating emails from meetings. I'm talking about separating project meetings from a sales meeting kind of thing. Right. And you say, if I had someone else run this sales meeting, what would I need to charge them or what would they need to charge me per hour to get the same result as what I'm getting? And once you list things out, you want the cream to rise to the top. You want the one or two things that you do that are worth the most per hour. I call these your most valuable activities.
Yep.
And then you want to schedule big chunks of time in your week, as much as is reasonable, for those activities during the time when you're least likely to be interrupted.
Okay, so let's just go through that formula again. That's very important. The first thing, I think, the way I call that is your hourly rate, your aspirational hourly rate. Okay, you establish the value of your time. Now, how can someone establish the value of their time? How do they do that practically? What do they do?
Well, that actually isn't where I start, although there is value in that. I mean, I would just say, based on the market, what would I charge someone per hour?
Okay.
What I'm really saying is objectively, I just list out all the things I do from the most valuable to the least valuable,
I see.
to running errands, going to the, wherever, picking up stuff at the hardware store,
Yeah.
which, anybody could do. So I might establish that as whatever minimum wage is, up to the top where I'm closing massive contracts that's worth hundreds of dollars per hour.
Yes.
And I look at that list and everything in between, and just objectively looking at what the market charges, I'm going to start to get a feel of what I'm really worth.
Yes.
Based on how I'm acting today.
Yeah.
If you want that to raise that value, do more of what's at the very, very top and do less of everything else.
That's beautiful. The reason I brought up that aspirational hourly rate is because it's a concept that I've applied in my business, in my life. And it's really interesting how quickly it transforms everything. Because you then ask yourself the question, hold on a second, is this worth the dollar amount that I have set? And if it's not, and it's within the time of my working, there's plenty of trivial stuff that we do that doesn't hit that $1,000 an hour or $2,000 or $3,000 an hour rate. And that's fine because there's a time and a place for that. But as far as work is concerned, if it doesn't hit that, I'm delegating or I'm purchasing somebody else's time in order to take care of that task.
Yeah, I think we're teaching the same principle. We're just using different methods to get there. But you brought up a great word, which is delegation. That is backtasking, where you hand something off to someone else so that you can focus on something that's more valuable. Now something's occurring in the background. Backtasking is productive, and you want to look for ways to do that throughout your day. But the problem is that's not how most people operate, and certainly not in the construction industry. They're constantly switch tasking, and switch tasking is always inefficient. You're going to pay heavy, heavy costs for that.
Okay, just to refresh us, give us that definition of backtasking again.
Yeah, so backtasking is where something mindless or automatic is occurring in the background. It's short for background tasking.
Okay.
So, starting someone else working on a project while I work on a different part of it, that's productive. That's helpful.
Beautiful. Now I want to go back to what you were saying earlier. When we were talking about the time blocks, you use a specific phrase to describe when I should have those time blocks in my schedule. Can you repeat that, please? Because I think it's very important.
You schedule your most valuable activities. That's the stuff that's worth most per hour. Your most valuable activities during the time where you're least likely to be interrupted.
That's it right there. Okay. That's beautiful. For everyone listening here, that right there is the key kernel for getting some sanity in your schedule. Is your most valuable activities when you're least likely to be interrupted. That's beautiful. Really appreciate that. Okay, so let's talk more about this idea of backtasking. What are some examples of backtasking other than the delegation? Give me some more on that.
Yeah, well, certainly anything that involves technology, where the machine, the computer is doing the work for you, it's crunching the numbers, that's useful. In a marketing sense, having collateral that's out there that's doing the work for you. Really anything where I am, for instance, exercising and I'm gaining knowledge at the same time, or I'm doing something else that's productive where it doesn't require my attention. And it's interesting because it brings up a question. Like, I'll give you one example that a lot of people bring up, which is listening to music.
Yeah.
For half the people out there, listening to music while they work makes them more productive. And for half the people out there, it makes them less productive.
Yes.
And that illustrates that for some people, like myself, it's switch tasking because I'm hearing music and I'm paying attention to the lyrics and all that kind of stuff. So it pulls me away. But for some people, it's back tasking. So when someone comes to me and says, Dave, is it good if I do this or is it bad if I do that? I say, look, this isn't a moral question. The question is, are you switch tasking or are you back tasking? If you're back tasking, efficient. Switch tasking, unproductive.
It's interesting you say that about music. I know that I find that I work really well with music, but different tasks require different types of music. So if I'm like banging out a presentation or a PowerPoint, I like to listen to trance or house music or something like that. But if I'm thinking, that's when the Bach comes on or the classical music, and different types of music have different impacts. And what's interesting is I don't listen to music when I'm working that has words in it, because like you were saying, I get distracted with those words. It's really interesting.
Yeah. I spent a couple of years trying to be a rock star way back in the day. I can't listen to any music.
Oh, really?
I analyze the heck out of it. White noise is far preferable for me.
Okay, so what instrument do you play?
I played keys. I wrote this and I sang. So I was kind of doing it all. Cool.
Yeah, I was a bad drummer in bad punk bands when I was in high school. Okay, now I want to go back to delegation though, because I think this is a key skill for effective leaders. What do you mean by delegation first? And then how can you effectively delegate? Give me something on that, please.
Yeah, so this kind of hints at some of the things I talk about in another one of my books, which is the focused business. And there's a common phrase that I hear, which is, by the time I could have trained someone else to do it, I could have done it myself, right?
Exactly.
And if you allow yourself to fall into that trap of being the jack of all trades, you are never going to increase your value per hour. So the question really it becomes not just how can I delegate a certain task to someone, but how can I systemize some of these things? How can I create a training process so that I don't have to tell that person over and over and over what to do? And that is a big deficiency that I see in the construction industry. Is I mean, obviously there's a do-it-yourself mentality, right? It's this like, again, that pride issue. I'm going to pride myself on my ability to do this.
Yep.
But what you really want to focus on is your ability to train others how to do it. That's what's going to increase your value per hour.
What is the relationship between delegation and accountability? How should those two things be playing together? Because many times, I delegate something and then it doesn't get done and I get frustrated, but I don't follow up in enough time. Give me some stuff on delegation and accountability.
Yeah, well, they go hand in hand. You cannot have delegation without accountability. And I'm going to be clear with my definition. I know everyone has a different definition. Sometimes people use accountability and responsibility interchangeably. Like, I need someone to be accountable. No, to me, accountability requires a third party. It requires someone outside of me who's checking on me. I coach business owners. I have a coach myself, and he holds me accountable through the same kind of numbers that other people are reporting to me, because I believe that we all benefit from someone outside of us who's holding us accountable. So if you're delegating things to people, you check in on them, and you check in on them even if they did a good job. It's not reserved for bad things. It's also for good things. Like, hey, I noticed that you did this. Great job. Thank you. That's also part of accountability.
Why do you think we need somebody, a person outside of ourselves, to help us with accountability? Why is that? Why can't I just stand on my own 2 feet and just take care of my business?
Well, I've got a really good friend who says there are 2 universal truths. It's lonely at the top and it's difficult to self-correct. And we all, and I would add a third truth: your spouse can't tell you anything. So that means that we need someone outside of us, someone outside of friends and family, someone in the workplace that we've given responsibility to hold us accountable to do that. We all benefit from that. If I want to improve my golf swing, I'm not going to try and do that myself, because I don't know what I'm doing with my hands and my feet. I need a coach. I need someone outside of me that says, are you aware that you're doing this ridiculous thing every time you swing? Oh, I wasn't. That's the value of that third party outside. They see what we cannot see.
Okay, excellent, excellent. We've talked about multitasking. Let's say I've tried to stop multitasking. I know it doesn't work, but I always get sucked into it. And that attempt is something that's just too frustrating for me, so I've given up. What should I do to try and get back on course, or to really get to that place where I'm more focused and I'm less distracted and less diffused in my efforts?
Yeah. First of all, understand that we're looking at small changes over time. I'm not expecting someone to jump from chaos to perfect focus. That's not realistic. So what we're doing is we're looking at each part of our day, each thing that's occurring. When I get an interruption, I ask myself, did I need to get that? How could I have reduced that? When a notification pops up on my phone, I say, could I have gone without that notification? Could I schedule a time to check my email instead? Could I schedule a time to check my text messages instead? Our goal is to look for 2% improvements. Now that sounds like nothing, right? Just a 2% improvement in your day. But a 2% improvement is an entire work week every year. When I say that, it always sounds wrong to me, but you do the math and you realize there are 52 weeks in a year. If I improve 2%, that's one of those. So I'm moving from 2% improvement to 2% improvement. I'm going to reduce the quick questions. I'm going to stop how much I answer the email. I'm going to, schedule time to focus on my work. And every little thing that we can do chips away at that switching cost that we're paying throughout our day.
So let me ask you then, where do I start? Because I might multitask all day, every day. What are the tasks or the things that I do that I should first focus on in order to begin to get that 2% improvement?
Okay, well, and I'm not sure if you want me to talk about reduction of switches or you want me to talk about prioritization with that.
I'm talking about, so you asked, the phone notifications, the interruptions from other people. If I want to get that incremental improvement, where do I first begin to focus my efforts to try and stop the switch tasking and start to begin the more focused effort?
Got it. Go for the easiest stuff. So I've talked about a lot of things here, and
Yep.
some of them, people who are listening to this, they go, I could do that. And then other ones, I said stuff, and they go, "There's no way that would work." Don't start with those.
Yes.
Start with the easy stuff. So again, like the notifications on your phone, I like to look at technology first and say, how is technology making it harder for me to focus? If it's not my phone, like on my computer, am I getting a little pop-up in the bottom corner? Yeah. Every little pop-up, every little beep, every little vibration that you're experiencing in your day, all of those things are causing you to switch task. Rescue Time, which is an app to help you focus, they did a study and they found that on average, people can only go 6 minutes until they check their email or their instant messages.
Yes.
That's 10 times per hour. And if you include the cost associated with that, that is terrible for your productivity. So if we can even just shift that down to once per hour, like you have a habit that at 50 minutes on every hour, that's when you check your email, that alone will have a huge reduction in the number of switches that you have in your day.
Okay, so, and let me take you to the part where we have that focus time. How long does that focus time need to be in order to have an impact? How much time do I need in a time block in order to get stuff done on a tough task, do you think?
I think of it like lifting weights. I would start you at whatever amount of time I think you can handle. So, maybe let's start, I would say at minimum an hour. You need to at least be able to do it an hour, ideally 90 minutes. And there's some brain physiology why 90 minutes is great. But I would try to start with there. And then just like lifting weights, I'd come back in 2 weeks and try and push it a little higher. Can we push it to 100 minutes? And we keep pushing it. The more and more we can do that. Now, I know that in the construction industry, we're probably going to start maxing out at around 2 hours of focus.
Yes.
Depending on your position.
Yes.
The more and more we can push that, the more and more successful you're going to become. And if you can block out a time and then communicate to everyone, hey, from 1 to 3, I won't be available, but at 3, the floodgates open, you can talk to me. Right. That sort of thing really empowers people and gets them out of that chaos mode.
Absolutely. Yeah, that communication is absolutely key. Okay, as we're wrapping up here, Dave, you've been very generous with your time. Let's just go with 3 practical takeaways that someone can immediately lay hold of to help them go from that switch tasking, that frustration, to a more focused effort in terms of their leadership and in terms of how they're handling their schedule.
Yeah. Do you want new ones? You want me to recap some of the ones that we've talked about?
You take it. What do you think hasn't been said that needs to be said, or what do you think needs to be emphasized?
Okay. Well, maybe I'll do 4. I'll just do a couple to recap. We've talked about reducing the technology interruptions.
Very good.
Along with that, scheduling time to check your email, scheduling time to check your text messages, that sort of stuff. We've also talked about building buffer into your day.
Very good.
Increasing the gap between appointments. I would also say making sure that you focus on people. We've talked about the 3 effects of switch tasking. Things take longer, you make more mistakes, you increase your stress. But when you multitask on a human being, you're communicating to them that they're not important. And that has a severely damaging effect in every relationship. So the good news is you can flip it. And when you talk to people, you focus on them, you give them 100% of your attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good. Don't multitask on human beings.
Right. Even if someone listens to this and they say, Dave, you're full of it. I can be productive. I can still do it. I can still multitask. But by the way, studies have shown the more likely you are to think that you're good at multitasking, statistically, you're worse at it. Okay, so I'll just say that. But let's say that you feel that you can still get away with it. You cannot avoid the 4th effect. When you pick up your phone while someone's talking to you and you're like, you are telling them that they are unimportant, and that is unavoidable.
Yes. Absolutely, 100%. I get reminded of that on a regular basis. I have a habit when my wife sits down and she wants to have a conversation about something, and I'm on my phone reading a very good book, of course, then what I do is I throw the phone on the other side of the couch so that I can give my undivided attention.
That's a great habit. You know, there have been studies that show that just the presence of the phone in a conversation decreases trust between the individuals. I'm not even talking about picking it up. Just having it sitting there on the table face up decreases the trust level between people.
Yep. Excellent. Okay, so Dave, I really appreciate this. I know that you have the book out on multitasking. What is that book called?
The Myth of Multitasking.
The Myth of Multitasking. Excellent. And it's the second edition. And where can someone get that book if they'd like to?
You go to multitaskbook.com. That'll take you right to Amazon, and you'll see all the different options that you can get at Kindle, paperback. Yeah.
Excellent. And you're at davecrenshaw.com. We'll put a link in the show notes to that. Excellent. All right. So Dave, I like to ask my audience, my guests a question. You're in Salt Lake, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we drove out to Salt Lake last year from California for the first time. I actually really enjoyed the drive. We went there to get to Colorado, so we went to Salt Lake and hung a right. But tell me, if I'm in Salt Lake, where is the best place to eat?
So here's a funny thing behind this. I've got a buddy who had the opportunity to have lunch with William Shatner.
Uh-oh.
And William Shatner told him about this place. So I checked it out, and I agree. It's Walter's Osteria. It's an Italian restaurant. The owner, I mean, this is where like the players for the Utah Jazz go. This is the spot. And the owner goes around. Sometimes he'll even make the food for you while they're there. Walter's Osteria is fantastic.
Excellent. We'll put a link in the show notes. And when you go there, Dave, what is the dish that you get every time or you like to get?
You've got to get, I don't know exactly what it's called, but you got to get for dessert it's like the lemon honey sorbet, and they make it fresh in front of you, and then they pour the honey on it, like lifting it way up to the ceiling as they pour it on there.
The lemon honey sorbet, I tell you, that sounds awesome. Well, Dave, I really, really appreciate your time. Enjoyed this conversation. Lots of key takeaways for the audience members. Thank you for your generosity here today.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity, Eric. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. Today's episode was brought to you by the Construction Conclave. If you as a construction leader would like to develop your skills and get involved in a community of like-minded construction professionals who are focused on building healthy teams, profitable projects, and long-term successful businesses, then the Construction Conclave is for you. It's a private, invitation-only group of construction leaders that are focused on developing their leadership skills. We do training every single month online that looks at how to become a better leader in a very practical, straightforward way. We also have other events that build community and camaraderie so that you can associate with others who are interested in developing their skills as leaders. If you'd like more information and to see if you qualify for participating in the conclave, feel free to reach out to me, eric@ericanderton.com. Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and thanks again for listening.